You made it to the Go Commando Show with Fred Galvin. On our new mission, we contend with the naked truths of health, leadership, and overcoming adversity. Now it's time to go commando. This evening I'm here with Darren Hamilton. He's a Marine Cobra pilot. We served together in the Marine Corps. His call sign was Nuke, and I'll let him explain that here in a little bit. We've been friends for coming on almost 20 years. About a little after 2001 when the war kicked off, we met through a mutual friend.
Yeah.
So, but he's actually here in Dallas, Texas. He did a little flying for his business that he works at over in Hawaiian Islands, where he flies tourists around. And we're going to get into some of that discussion here in a little bit. But we wanted to talk a little bit about his life and how he got into flying attack helicopters. So from your initial flight training until you were actually trained as a helicopter pilot in the squadron, how long did that take?
It took just over 2 years.
So 2 years till
2 years.
Even though you had flight training at the Air Force Academy before you graduated, some basic flight training, two more years.
Yeah, the military has its way of doing things, and I did a what they call T-41 training. It's basically you train up in a Cessna 172, get a few hours, and as a follow-on to that, you can actually go to civilian flight training, and you can get after about 20 hours, I think you get your recreational license. So I actually did that. So when I graduated, I had my private pilot's license. And I didn't realize at the time, but I really helped myself out later in my career by doing that ahead of time. Yeah.
Right. So when you were at the Marine Basic Officer course, you had a flight guarantees at 6 months. You're there on the ground. What stage was it that you decided you wanted to be an attack helicopter pilot versus flying troop transport or C-130s or jets? Or
I heard it said once. It's really not, you don't pick your aircraft really picks you. There's just certain characteristics of each community that really are kind of brought out. And I think, the guys go off to fly jets have certain unique characteristics. That's what that community wants. There's certain characteristics of the attack helicopter community that they really look to polish, and then there's also the heavy lift and cargo and utility, the Hueys as well. So in the mad mix of it all, it doesn't really matter which airframe you target. You're really going to end up in the airframe you want to be in, and you're going to love it no matter what. And that was, I went from wanting to be a fighter guy to all of a sudden really enjoying the attack helicopter community.
So like Dave, who we spoke to earlier, he also flew the attack helicopter pilot, the AH-1W Cobra. And would you tell us a little bit about the mindset and the characteristics that you have to be a successful attack helicopter pilot in the Marine Corps?
Like any airframe, it's really heavy focus. I would say if there's really a mental condition or whatever you want to call that, another profession that's very similar to it's like a quarterback. You have all these tools at your disposal, and you have to optimize which tool you're going to use to get the job done. But not only are you trying to see the battle space in this 3-dimension and match the tools to the job that needs to be done, but you have to coordinate all the other players out there to ensure that that the job's getting done in an efficient manner, but also in a very in a very safe, or mitigate the risk with all the tools you have available, and orient them in the right direction. You can go. You have about 1,000 ways to get the job done. What you have to do is figure out what's the most optimal way to match everything symmetrically and asymmetrically. So that you always retain the advantage over your opponent or over whatever the stated mission is.
It's interesting you talk about that, and there's a lot of people who, whether they complete a bachelor's or a master's program. They feel, that should be enough to get them in the door and get them a really great job, and that's the ticket. But you're saying, even after you had your bachelor's from the Air Force Academy, you did 2 years specialized training, but you're checking in the squadron. You're basically what we call in the military a boot.
Yeah.
You don't have, you just have the bare minimums of information. But at that stage, like a lot of people who are new in the business world, you're just starting out. So tell us, you're having to learn tactics, weapon systems, and how to make split-second, very important decisions inside that cockpit. How is that like when you're a new pilot in the squadron?
It's overwhelming. That there's a syllabus that they walk you through, but when you first get in, I remember the squadron I checked into, they had this little 2-week-long university course that we went through. And it was just 2 weeks of indoctrination, basic weaponry, and you're just given, just like any graduate level program, a stack of books. Here, go home, read all this, and come back and be able to apply this. So it's a crawl, walk, run, but you're sprinting even before you know how to crawl. And so we felt very, very behind, because not only do you have to have the coordination, the muscle memory to flip all the switches and press all the right buttons and see the battle space in 3 dimensions, but you have to do it in very austere conditions. And eventually get to where you're flying on night vision goggles and in very extreme conditions, low to the ground, very fast, where even the smallest mistake could be fatal for you, your crew, or for people on the ground.
In your particular helicopter, unlike other Marine aircraft such as the Harrier, you have 2 pilots. And talk to me about how important the role of a mentor is when you're a young pilot, and you said it was kind of overwhelming. How can that more senior pilot in the aircraft help you out?
Well, the one thing, the Cobra community was renowned for their ability to eat their own.
Right.
So mentorship wouldn't be in like the conventional sense. It was more like the one who didn't beat you up as much as all the other guys. This guy you kind of went to and sought the guidance of. And I still remember my mentor today. Just a good guy who understood that the stuff's hard, and you can't be automatically you understand it. And that was it was pivotal to a lot of us. And like any organization, you have the politics involved, and everybody's trying to get that ideal next assignment, and a lot of the personal ties in there, and kind of adjusting values. It was kind of a difficult place to be sometimes, because if you weren't out flying, you're pulling operations duty officer. If you weren't pulling operations duty officer, you're a squadron duty officer. And if you weren't in garrison, you'd be out on 2 to 3 week detachments, getting ready to go overseas for 6 to 8 months at a time. So there's a lot of time commitments and a lot of personal stress on all fronts. Married now, not at the time. I don't think I could have been married and do what I did.
And talking about how it's so demanding as an attack pilot, with all the capabilities that you, as well as your section, you're flying with multiple aircraft out there, obviously. Sometimes you're escorting somebody, sometimes at night. You've deployed overseas, and sometimes you're in a jungle environment at night, very dangerous. And tell me about some of the challenges, like how intense it was. I'm sure you had some close calls, and we both have friends who unfortunately have passed away flying the attack helicopter. But what were some of the very demanding skills that you learn and practice in the helicopter, in the cockpit?
It is really muscle memory. It was not when those split second decisions are required. Just being able to think as you act, but also not act so quickly that you haven't thought through what you're about to do. In any aircraft, it's really easy turning a flying aircraft into a non-flying aircraft by the flip of a switch if you analyzed or diagnosed the situation incorrectly. And just having those reflexes built in and being able to diagnose right off the bat, because the ground is only a couple hundred feet away sometimes, and on top of that, that's the mechanical situation. But if you're in the tactical situation where you're getting ordnance off the aircraft, probably one of the big issues we had to really break ourselves of was target fixation. Get so focused on trying to get ordnance on the target, you just be staring at it, especially on night vision goggles, or if you have some kind of designation system, an infrared laser of some sorts. You're staring at that so much, you kind of forget everything around you.
You've got another wingman there, or you got friendlies here, or you got threats here that you're just. And I think in the business world, that's very important, because sometimes people are thinking that their job is just one thing, and they ignore. They focus their sights strictly on that, and they're unaware of the other threats.
We called it looking through the straw.
Yes.
So when you're looking through the straw, you have your singular focus on this one area, and you may hit exactly what you're shooting at, but it doesn't do anybody any good if you run into the ground right in front of it while you're doing it. So we had to break ourselves of those habits and really kind of trust other pilots to break, say, hey, listen, pull up, so that inter crew communications was very pivotal, based on familiarity and trust, and a lot of just working together at times. Yeah.
Now, much like Dave, who'd flown the attack helicopter and spoke to us earlier, you also, prior to Dave doing it, decided that you wanted to do a ground fact tour. That's a pilot who's trained to not just fly the aircraft, but goes to a special school to learn how to control mortars, artillery, and aviation ordnance, kinetic and non-kinetic, in support of those ground units on the ground. And Darren had the very rare opportunity to do that twice, which is normal for a pilot to do one, or sometimes they don't do it at all, but it's very demanding. And what was your first deployment like? Can you briefly describe some of the key training highlights that you did with the Maritime Special Purpose Force?
Yeah, so I went out with the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, and I was just I showed up in really good shape, and everybody kind of picked up on that, and they said they needed somebody to go out and do some of the kind of tougher deals, where we would fast rope, where we would have to to go on what are they, on the Zodiacs, the
small boats,
LRCs, rubber raiding craft, whatever. We had to do a lot of those long range kind of missions as well. So it was what I signed up to do. It wasn't flying attack helicopters, but it was going alone and unafraid out into the dark and doing some stuff you could brag to your kids about later on.
And some of those training missions, we have a month-long training workup for a particular phase that is done in an urban environment. So I know training on the West Coast where we met, ours were done throughout the Los Angeles area. And where were some of those missions that you had conducted, those raids?
We did. Was it Site True?
Right. Yeah,
we did that up in San Jose, Oakland,
the Bay Area.
The Bay Area, yeah. So this is right about the time they'd shut down Alameda Naval Air Station. So we went down there and it was a perfect spot for what we were doing, because we were bringing up all our aviation assets. And I remember flying in the back of a CH-46 over Alcatraz, all jocked up, and we were doing a little practice mission into some of the old housing there at Alameda. And at the time, I just remember thinking, like, we're really doing this. This is like Hollywood stuff that you're really training to do
in an urban environment out there where people are living and taking live explosive charges out in the middle of a...
we did one at old Marine Land. It's actually now a resort there by Palos Verdes, and I just remember going through that like this is kind of ironic, or just being from a suburban household, all of a sudden back in suburbia playing war again as a 26-year-old Marine captain. So it was fun. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't. We didn't take it lightly. We practiced. We rehearsed, and every step was thought through.
So just before your time as a Ford Air Controller, the unit that we both had served with, just prior to the time that we're talking about, had been in a very bad training accident off the coast of San Diego that actually killed 6 Marines and a corpsman. That they were practicing a mission which we call the visit board search and seizure, and that's basically fancy phrase for calling it a ship takedown, which is a mission that we have to do once we deploy. And, platoon I was with, we did 36 of those in the Persian Gulf, but you had the rare opportunity, because on a force recon platoon that has 25 Marine reconnaissance personnel, we only have one pilot that goes in there, and that mission is very, very sophisticated, because whether you go in by helicopter onto a small ship or by boat, or have elements that do both, you're talking about multiple 3-dimensional moving platforms with helicopters with snipers in them, and you have that target ship that you're landing on that's moving 3-dimensionally, and it can actually try to evade you, so it's very difficult. But what were your considerations knowing that we just had that crash not too long before your training, and the risks of marine aviation trying to hover and land on a small ship like that?
You just learn to kind of put that in a little box and you put it away. You trust the team, you trust the other pilots, you trust the guys in the back of the helicopter with you. You just kind of tuck it away, and
right.
And it goes away. I was very fortunate. On every deployment, we brought everybody back.
Right.
We did some pretty advanced stuff, but we were it's just that the professionalism we exhibited, and then the planning, and then knowing our roles was very critical.
Yes.
You just kind of learn to compartmentalize and put it
Yes.
somewhere else, and go on with the mission. And just fortunately, I was one of the many that made it through unscathed. You only hear about the things that go wrong, and that was the Pecos incident, and that unfortunately went very wrong for the Marines and that sailor. But we still have to go out there and do.
Yes.
Did then still have to do what we were doing. So,
Yes.
it was just something we just kind of compartmentalized and moved on.
One thing that makes it very unique in the Marine Corps team is we actually have Marine officers or attack helicopter pilots that serve with us on the ground, and that's where Darren and I's paths crossed. I was actually out on a deployment at the time in the Middle East, and Darren had received orders to become a part of our unit at 1st Force Reconnaissance Company in Camp Pendleton. So that's where we first made the connection. We'd met before then, and then but having that opportunity to, and this had just started, so on previous assignments I had in the Force Reconnaissance community, we didn't have air officers. So I think Darren was the third air officer, and those were typically 12 to 18 month assignments. And so having Darren and his knowledge on coordinating with aircraft, scheduling them, deconflicting it when we were out there planning these close air support, which is a fancy word of saying airstrikes. It was great having an actual pilot to do that, since just 3 years prior to that, we were much like how the Navy SEALs were, and we'd be doing it all ourselves without any subject matter expert actual pilot doing it. And what Darren was mentioning with having people do their specific duties, they have skills, that was really huge help for us. And one of the things that comes to my mind is when we were first working together at 1st Force Reconnaissance Company. I was just back from that deployment and working in the operations section there with you, and we did not know that we were going to be on this constant cycle of 6 months overseas and 6 months back, and then Darren was able to go on another deployment with us. I don't know if he thought he was going to not be going on a deployment, but the Marine Corps didn't know, and so we were able to take him with us. But we were doing some training before that to prepare our Marines to be able to control aviation fires, and you were planning that. So what are some of the things that went into the planning and training of the Marines to release ordnance at very close proximities to us? And can you describe some of that training?
Well, I had trained up several years prior to a previous deployment, so I was able to show up at the company.
Yes.
I hit the ground running, so I didn't have to go through the training and learn the process. Showing up there, I was home on leave from another deployment. No, I just returned home from a deployment, and I was out with some friends, and that's where I met the gentleman who was the current air officer there, Torch Myers, and he said they're trying to find a Cobra pilot to come in and take over as the air officer there, and I said I'd nominate some people. So I went in that next morning, and somehow that turned into I'll do it, and so I had orders that Friday.
But Mike has said they are trying to do that.
Yeah,
I had a few years before that, in 2002, had just left being an instructor at the Marine Corps' version of Top Gun, and having that experience there. There's a wide variety of pilots in the Marine Corps. Some fly troop transport, some fly C-130, some fly electronic attack platforms that don't have any interaction with Marines on the ground. And being an instructor out there controlling, on a very routine basis, aviation fires, I was telling Torch, Micah Myers, or he was an F-18 pilot, I was telling him, we're going to get an attack pilot. We're not going to get a troop transport pilot that we have to teach all these skills. So it was really good because Darren, who had completed all this previous training as a forward air controller working with Marines on the ground, and even working with the Force Recon platoon on a amphibious deployment on ships, now he comes back, he's fully qualified. He played college football, he's very athletic, reinforced with his experience in the Marines, and he slips right in there because I was really hounding Micah Myers. Yeah. Micah was the one that right before the war in Iraq started, the commanding officer at that time said we need to come up with a company call sign. Yeah. So he comes and finds me, and he talks. We were working late that night, which was normal, and I told him, I'm like, we have to find a name that's has a hidden meaning, and we came up with a call sign, Broadsword.
Go Commando.
So like the broadsword that a warrior carries, and that's still to this day that unit, and it's but anyway. So you arrived at the company, and what was some of the training like that you trained the Marines on for airstrikes?
I carried lessons I brought from the line units I served with a few years prior. But what I found was that the Force Recon Marines were all more mature. They're more flexible. They really were able to kind of. They didn't have to be spoon fed so much. If you said, "Hey, I just need an hour of your time this morning," they'd make it happen. They knew how to kind of shift on the fly far more with far less rigidity than the line grunt unit. And
at this time, the Marines had been in combat for 3 years,
right?
And basically doing 6 on, 6 off. So their time was very important, but they knew that it was what we're doing with not just aviation but intelligence-driven operations. So intel would tell us, and then we'd heavily use aviation for cueing, which is a fancy word to get indication and warning of what the enemy's doing. But Darren would help us plan all these very complex training packages, and to go out into the desert and drop a lot of live ordnance at the minimum distance that we can in training out there in the desert, and we would do those very frequently to stay on top of it.
Did that a lot, and it was just it was the right time, the right place. The motivation was there. And the teamwork within that company at the time was stellar. If you actually think back and look back to what we were working on, you can think of a better group of guys that came together to do that, and especially really showed in combat. When you actually look at the raw data that was generated by the company and at least that deployment, and the fact that we didn't lose anybody, we're doing.
That's the only unit in the Marine Corps that has a kinetic or a mission that's offensive in the attack, that since the beginning of the war in 2001 until today has never lost anybody in combat, and it's just absolutely remarkable. And I think it's a lot to mention how aviation as well as intelligence were developed in that company. And prior to that, there was a lot of training casualties, fatalities, very unfortunate. And after a series of those, ironically, the Marine Corps moniker of, the more we sweat in peacetime, the less we bleed in war, is true. That that unit, like these Marines, that they didn't have much time, but you said, I need X amount of your time, and they showed up there ready to, but they knew it was important, and they're going to make the time. And when you're overseas for 6 months and back for 6 months, time is critical. And those Marines in that unit, I knew, never complained. It was all business 100% of the time, and they loved it.
And we also jumped a lot. I found that I could sweeten the pot a little if I could guarantee them a certain number of free fall jumps, either every other week or something. We jumped a lot, man. I mean, we were jumping fools, and
good times.
I think that was kind of everybody saw that. Just from the officers down, everybody's really gelled, and I think that we had communicate real swift and meaningful communication that just kind of bled through the whole unit, and then that singular focus of all the talent we had was really critical to our success. And to a large degree, it was somewhat fleeting because we did all the combat operations, and then everybody kind of splintered out. But I soon realized after that was the best it was going to get for me.
Yes. When you bring up parachute operations, specifically Freefall, it's a lot of people think, well, we're going to war. Is that what we're really doing? And we still had Marines going out on ship that had to maintain that capability for operations across the entire Pacific and Middle East. That Freefall capability we had just like this crash doing the ship seizure mission in 1999. There was, just before the war kicked off in Iraq, or Afghanistan actually, there was a training fatality at First Force that involved a young Marine sergeant who, in free fall, the mishap resulted in him impacting the earth and dying. So we do those often, just like planning airstrikes, very building block approach, because if you don't do it at all, the risk really increases, just like it does in aviation. You have to make decisions. You have to have emergency procedures that are rehearsed, known when to do what procedures, so that you don't impact with the earth. You don't sacrifice altitude for stability. That's one of the sayings we have. But we always wanted to maintain those skills so it wasn't dangerous. And that's, you're coming to the company and scheduling those aircraft, has led to, we have not had Marines killed in action. And that was, I don't know any other unit in the Marine Corps or in, the Green Berets or a regular Navy SEAL unit that deployed 6 months overseas and 6 months back. They did that for year after year. It's a remarkable testament to all the Marines that were doing everything to make that happen each year.
Remember, we'd lost a lot of the mid-level talent there to go over to what would later become MARSOC, right? But
right.
We lost a lot. So we weren't dealing with the normal group of reconnaissance or force recon Marines. We had a much younger element there for a while.
And what you're describing is, a lot of people don't know when the Marine Raiders or Marine Special Operations actually started, which happened in 2006, and our company was the first to deploy in 2007. But prior to that, on the East Coast, you had a force recon company. On the West Coast, you had a force recon company, and that was the absolute elite of the Marine Corps. And they had these 5 platoons that, if you were a Marine on the West Coast, you did everything. I mean, the NDOC to qualify was extremely competitive and extremely challenging, and so was the schools.
Yeah.
But these men were the best that the Marine Corps had.
Yeah.
And they did have a force recon company in Okinawa. But at that time, when the war started in 2001, they were not deploying to the force recon platoon was deploying strictly on the ships and not on the MEUs.
Right.
So on the West Coast, you had Marines that were actually deploying on ships. They'd come back from that, as I did, and they'd deploy on a flyover deployment.
Back around again, yeah.
And that leads us to where you and I, when we had been training the Marines, and I got put back into a platoon, thank goodness, and got to deploy again in 2005 with you. We went over to Iraq, and we're working very closely with the aviation assets where we could plan face-to-face in most cases, and explain how important that is to have two, like in the business world, two very different capabilities, a very specialized offensive capability on the ground with very robust, we had the entire Marine Corps suite of aviation. We could do electronic attack, surveillance.
Yeah, if you remember, we had kind of a confluence of events there. Everybody was really on edge because they had the 2 F-18s that ran into each other at the tanker, and then they had the 53 that crashed and
killed a lot of people in 2004.
So there's really on the aviation side there was this
hesitancy
kind of
push forward.
Yeah, they're pulling the reins back, and here we show up having done some pretty aggressive workups, and I think a lot of people were kind of shocked, and I remember having to sit down with some of the squadron commanders or even some of the senior pilots and have to go through brief after brief to say, okay,
advocate for
this is what we're going to do, and you guys can do this, but please tell me if you don't. And I just remember some of the more advanced level stuff, and I think what happened was we were very successful early on, and that bred other success, and all of a sudden
people wanted to get into it.
People want to get into it, and that
we got all the support we ever needed.
Yeah. So we primed the pump a little, but it was just through that diligence to the detail on the plans where they realized that their piece was actually not that complex. The real complexities were after their piece of the puzzle was removed. It was mostly the insert and extract stuff, but I just remember getting the reins pulled back as we tried to do the combat jump and other stuff.
Yes.
But
I'm going to talk about two particular, maybe three instances where we were out on missions together, and ask you some of your thoughts and recollections, because we haven't talked about this since, and this was 2005, so about 12
years ago. Yeah.
I remember this one mission we were on in an area of Iraq, and I'm not trying to take a jab at the infantry battalion that was in this space, but it was so bad. There was a reserve infantry battalion that had basically withdrawn to their base at this dam, and so the enemy territory had just become, the enemy had overran and had complete freedom of movement and controlled this particular town, an area called Haditha. And I remember one night we went in there using boats, and it was Darren had planned the air package for it, so we had a couple redundant layers with some Cobras that had checked on stations, some attack helicopters that he had flown, and also an AC-130. It's an Air Force Special Operations aircraft with a 105 millimeter howitzer cannon, and it has great sensors. So we're planning on going into this town that had basically been so bad and attriting an entire infantry battalion that they had the highest casualty rate of the Iraq War for any Marine unit. So I remember that the Cobra's checking on station, and you were prodding me like, we need to cross this street and get in there. And you cross the street, and it was, despite how some people may think, it was a very well lit urban area, and some Marines that I'd served with as a young lieutenant, had previously been killed in that area, and I wanted to make sure we had this AC-130 gunship. And Darren was like, "Let's go." And the AC-130, the Air Force did finally show up, and it was good to have them on our backs because they had a much greater sensors looking straight directly down from what we call God's eye view of what is going on in the town when we are pushing in to do these raids in various locations that night. But what were your recollections of planning and doing either that mission or one in that area?
I think that was my first raid in country.
Oh,
I think,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I think so.
I think that, I'd shown up. We went up to the dam. Then we did all the rehearsals all afternoon, and somewhere in the midst of all this, I forgot to drink water.
I remember. You're very dehydrated on that mission.
So
I remember.
So I remember we did that all day. Then we finally got all jocked up. Went out on the hit. We went
Middle of the night.
Middle of the night. I hadn't slept for 48 hours, or whatever, and we went through the
just flown across the country,
around the world, and we had to get up that little hill, and then it was that field of kind of like clay, slippery, muddy, whatever it was,
and we'd been, been operating for a while. And I knew that we were gonna, every time you go into this area in Haditha, you're gonna get this a ton of dogs. They're gonna start barking,
I remember
letting the whole world know.
Well, it sounded like a football stadium. I was like, is there like a block party going on over there? And just this low rumble of noise, and as we got closer, I realized, those are the dogs.
Right.
Yeah, they were just barking up. Sorry, if I remember,
That's why I wanted the big gunship above us, instead of just the Cobras. They just didn't have a long time on the station. I wanted to really make sure this is a really bad area.
Well, that's what we learned in theater. Was you get the sound of the helicopters, nothing would happen. It was when that sound went away.
Right.
That's when you'd get jumped.
You get stuck.
And so I remember trying to push you for it, but we weren't going to move till the AC-130 was overhead, and then so we waited that out, and I just remember my legs were cramping up, and I could hardly walk, but got down to the boat.
Nuke was, as he said, a big, college football player, and 6'4", 230.
Yeah.
So he rude awakening coming all the way across the world and going on that mission. Right, and I remember we were on the north side of Haditha practicing those boat rehearsals the whole day before with a buddy of mine who, ran that boat platoon. But
that's right.
there was another mission, and I also think you were on one in Husayba that we left from Al Qaim. Went to the mansion.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what I remember, and I was cautioning our commanding officer to, not go down the main roads. We'd like to stay off the normal beaten path that the infantry would normally take, and go through the desert either on foot or come in a non-traditional way by air, by boat. But that day, it was decided top down. We didn't really like it, but we were getting it fed. We're going to do the hey diddle diddle straight up the middle and go into the heart of darkness. And so, and we were at this train station. There's only so much ways you can prepare. I mean, so we lined the vehicles up because you didn't have any other ways to do that. And going in there that night, we had a little excitement. So can you describe a little bit about what happened going into? We were going to take over this, what they call the mansion. We fought out of that for several days, but we're going to go take over this area so we can control and lighten up some of the resistance for the infantry battalion there. But can you tell a little bit about how that mission went that night?
Yeah, that was. I didn't find out until after the fact that they were calling that RPG Alley. So that was. I'm glad I didn't know that going in. But no, I'd always sit in the 5-ton. Remember, I'd always sit back, assistant
big
driver.
Transport truck.
Yeah, but so you could be up a little higher, so you could, get the lasers activated if you need them. But I just remember rolling down, and it I wouldn't call it hell on earth, but it was tracers kind of everywhere, and most of them were going high because that road was actually sunk down.
These are the Iraqi insurgents, the Mujahideen, or actually people from this is right next to the Syrian border. So this is people from all over the world trying to get their jihad on and kill some Americans. The tracers were people firing at us with machine guns and AK-47s and then rocket-propelled grenades, firing volley fire into this big sack that we were driving into, this road we were really channeled in. And
so we're rolling down. I'm up high, so I can see what's going on. All of a sudden, the vehicle in front of me just disappears in a cloud of smoke, and I thought they got hit. So I started dialing in. We had fixed wing overhead. I'm talking to those guys, and they're
had some attack helicopters too.
Did we have them right there? It wasn't until we got to the hit site, right?
When we got to the hit site, but I remember they came in and fired a missile into a house, and I remember that head. Watching the tapes afterwards, I don't know if you saw it, and this head of a guy shot out across the courtyard and bounced against the walls.
I slept through that part, I think. But no, I remember calling in talking to anybody. Hey, what I wanted, because we ran up on the cusp of that mission, and that's one of my greatest examples of keeping mission focused, because our mission was to go assault the mansion, but there was this tendency, I think, within the group that we're gonna go find these guys trying to kill us, and we're going to kill them back, kind of thing. Right. But we kind of said no, keep on mission. Our mission's the palace, or just keep going to the palace, I remember thinking, man, I want to finish up these airstrikes. I want to, eliminate these guys. And
probably wouldn't have made it if we stopped there.
Yeah, it was that was nasty. That yeah, and
so not any of our Marines.
But to a man, every single guy, after we all kind of decompressed and everything, every vehicle, each guy said, I saw the vehicle in front of me disappear in a cloud of smoke, and we thought you were all dead.
Right.
So the guys in the truck behind me were saying, man, we saw you blow up. And I said, well, I could have sworn I saw the vehicle up in front of me blow up too. I don't know what was going on. Maybe it was the dust or something, but it was just that fog and friction of war. And we got out of there, relatively unscathed.
Our communicator in our platoon was yelling over the radio, "Vehicle 5 is taking fire!" And then he was telling me later, he was like, your communication back to me sounded like you were asleep. And I think that is important as a leader, that you're coming across the radio very calm and organized in assuring that, they hear your voice and it's composed, and that no matter you're in the worst situation on the earth. I mean, I think some of that is just, it's an incredible, I thought it was a little miracle that we were attacked so violently, and, stopping, some people think, you need to stop and fight, stop and counterattack through. You'd have just been, it would have been a slaughter. We had so many Marines killed that night, and using aviation to do the job after. I mean, our Marines were returning fire. I remember the Marine in our vehicle just, Pat Dauphin, just firing and just killing people that were firing at us. And then aviation, the smart thing is, use some of these tools like you'd mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, we and that's where I kind of developed a little kind of break contact technique that the gentleman who ended up taking over the air officer job from Dave was actually airborne, and we just call for specific strafing runs in certain directions, and that would lay down enough fire to break contact at least, and that became kind of a unusual tactic to allow, especially the special operations units to get past something that's not their primary mission. Just really, more than anything else, just kind of frighten the enemy to get them to duck long enough so you can get out of Dodge and carry on.
Talking about that, you bring up, so that squadron that was flying, he's talking about a Marine F-18 jet squadron that was in support of us. I think they were the Bengals or the Hellcats, or
I can't remember.
I'm not exactly sure. It's been a few years.
Oh, we had Smoke, who were the reserve guys, and they were as reliable as you could get. And then, but it was the
East Coast
two-seaters. Yeah, it was the guys out of Atlanta, and then but it was an East Coast two-seat F-18s for. And the hard part with those guys is they were considered a theater asset, so we could request them, but it was up to the theater commander to dish them off because they were also electronic warfare.
Yes.
And so we had to kind of use the workarounds to get those guys. But once we made the connection with the right people up there, we got them when we really needed them.
Talking about another time when I think you were on this particular mission when we were out right on the Syrian border at Camp Bannon. Were you there?
Yeah, Camp Gannon, right?
Camp Gannon.
Gannon.
Okay, so we talked to the Marine infantry who'd had a tough go in that area.
Oh, yeah.
3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and they'd had a really difficult time, and we said, where is your worst area in your battle space there along? So the border, they said Saddam Hussein could never even control it with his heavy hand, and along the border with Syria, so people were just coming across to fight Americans, and it was a bad time in 2005. So the infantry company commander, that captain, he said the worst area on earth is right here in the 440 district. And so we decided we were going to join forces with the infantry, and they had some tanks, and they had some Amtraks, and they had some heavy weapons vehicles, and they basically surrounded the city on all 3 sides. And
that's right.
I think I was asking you, I said, hey, we're going to sweep this area very violently from north to south, and we're just going to get online and just crush and go into every home and root out every bad guy door to door, just crush them down as hard as we could. But I said, about 5 minutes into this, I want to shake the enemy up by dropping a.
That's right.
I don't know if it was a 2,000 pounder.
Well, it was a few.
Big bomb just south of out in the desert, but we dropped this bomb and I think the CO got in a little heat after we had done that, because that was at that time not considered. We were doing it as a deception operation to let the enemy shake them up, thinking like, are they coming from the north? Are they blowing us up in the south? And it really did. The enemy.
It caused them to pause in place, right?
Yeah, we were very effective that night.
Don't remember, we had a Predator feed the day prior at some point in there that was showing weapons being unloaded from a vehicle. I remember that they're like, yeah, it's this house over here, and we cleared well over 120 houses.
Just a big sweep in a matter of a few hours that night.
Yeah, remember, I think a couple weeks before that, they'd had a huge vehicle-borne IED come in and kill a couple guys at the gate. So, I mean, they were a little timid from that, I think, and so we showed up. I think that was when didn't we do a ground infill to the base, or was that after? That was the exfil from the palace by foot, right?
Well, on the mission in the 440, we walked.
Oh, we did the leader's recon the night prior, and I drank a lot more water this time. That was. I mean, it was. We kind of owned that neighborhood, but mainly through fire kinetically. But
and it's not. I know a lot of people have different things to say about different units. Some people made fun of special operations. I mean, First Force is very disciplined. There's no casualness, nothing unprofessional, because we were still a part of the Marine Corps. This is pre-Marine Raiders, but we did need to help our Marine brothers in the infantry, and they'd had some tough times with some of these suicide vehicle bombers. These car bombers just coming in and crashing in their gate, and really taking their licks. And so our one Force Recon active duty platoon went out there to assist, and I think it says a lot for working with your fellow Marine in this case, or in a business setting, having not necessarily a mentor, but an advocate, somebody to assist you and help you out. I think that's really important.
That's really what we were doing there. What was these guys had been scarred a little recently, and we went out and said, are you afraid of that neighborhood over there, or if that's a problem, we're gonna go fix that. And after we cleared all that out, I think those guys start breathing a little easier. Realized, hey, we're not alone and unafraid out at this little desert outpost now.
Yes.
If we need help, it's going to come, and it's going to come in a very decisive and strong manner. And then you could see those guys breathing a lot easier when we showed up.
Yeah.
I remember,
and they had a successful time the rest of their deployment afterwards.
Yeah. I remember their air officer, who was somewhat junior to me, just sitting around the computer, and I showed him a few things that were going on, and kind of showed him some of the ways you can get more air support pushed over your way, but you got to work sometimes within the system, sometimes around it, but there are ways to get your request kind of bumped up in the stack, and just kind of just tried to give him a shot of how to be a little more successful than he had been out there out in the middle of nowhere. So
yeah, that was truly it was the farthest west, the Wild West, and it was a tough area. And now you had mentioned that it was you were brought into First Force Reconnaissance Company from your predecessor, the guy who you succeeded, and that was, like I mentioned, that was my urging that air officer, hey, we need somebody who's an attack pilot. What would you say the mindset and the differences in an attack, somebody who's either flown jets and who's looked down day after day every time he's flying, especially as he's got those combat flying experiences, or in your case, flying an attack helicopter low and slow, working directly, talking to, seeing the enemy, firing? What are the main differences in character and mindset?
I would say all guys have kind of the same character. They're all reliable. They're going to give you the shirts off their backs. They're going to do the best job they can. But a lot of what the cargo or troop lift helicopter guys are used to, large troop movements, and they're good at organizing everybody, getting them all lined up, and making sure the right guys get on the right helicopters. I was pretty bad at that. I was more on the weapons matching and symmetric and asymmetric matching to the threats. F-18 guys were very similar to the Cobra or Huey guys out there. They understood the battle space and where the weapons were to be optimized.
It's a lot to learn the different weapons that they have.
It is a lot.
An urban environment where you're worried about killing a Marine, because some of these guys are fighting us very close, and then you have unknowns or civilians, and you can't always drop a 2,000-pound bomb. Sometimes you have to.
I remember on that specific raid, myself and one of the other Fort Air Controllers that were going out on the JTACs, we had a big disagreement because the run-in headings I wanted to use actually pushed the F-18s out into Syrian airspace, and he said no, they can't go into Syrian airspace, they have to come in at this heading. And I said, well, if they drop long, they're going to be dropping right into friendlies, and I don't know how I think we just agreed to disagree, and each guy would make his own calls, and it all worked out just fine. But I really didn't, with Marines on the ground and in the conduct of a mission, I don't care about Syrian airspace a whole lot. Right. Apparently he did. So, but it all worked out okay, obviously.
I'd like to talk about some things a little bit different nature. So as you were serving with us at First Force Reconnaissance Company, I remember we came back off that deployment, and we were working up for our next deployment going back to Iraq. You came down with some hearing. They assessed your hearing was starting to have some serious problems and everything, but we didn't have any kind of gaps. And I want to talk to those veterans or those people who are trying to learn, hey, you may have a problem with whether it's a resource in your organization. This is something beyond your control. Right. Some of it, possibly genetics, possibly work related, but you're not going to stop doing what you're doing. You did your job, and you were training another officer to take your place. You described a little bit about how your mindset and how you were every single day you're giving your best.
when you really enjoy the job, the people you're working with, it's easy to do a good job. And it was really not so much a reflection of me as just the enjoyment I found doing the job I was doing. And yeah, I mean, there are numerous curveballs thrown at me throughout between hearing issues, back and knee issues, shoulder issues. But yeah, you strap it on and go out there and give it your best, and do if it's not for you, do it for the people around you. And because they'll see you dragging from time to time, they'll pick down and they'll give you a hand and pick you up as well. And so it wasn't a hard thing for me to just kind of get through. Or maybe I'm just my cerebral function just doesn't recognize pain like a normal person or something. But
now you do.
But now I do. No, it was just the confidence of youth combined with just really having a lot of. Yeah, I just remember the friendships I had there were just very, very sincere, and we just had a lot of fun, and we were the kind of guys who could go out and disagree about things, butt heads on all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, we could also have beers together and make jokes and just relax in each other's company as well.
And in combat, if there was an agreement or disagreement in planning, by the time we slapped the table and said this is the mission,
it didn't matter.
Every Marine, it didn't matter. Every Marine and every cell in every Marine's body was working towards the same goal. Yeah. Contact with the enemy may change some things, but it was very well trained and disciplined unit, and we accomplished things very effectively. And I want to take a quick pause and talk to you about something before we transition to our next subject, and that's as Darren has been describing some of the other physical problems that he's had, we both had with his knees and back, and you get those problems if you're an athlete, especially a competitive athlete playing soccer, football. You do any cutting motions with your lower body and changing direction really quickly. You have these and just the wear and tear. One of the products I want to tell all these listeners, whether you're a pilot, you may have back issue from the helicopter, serving on the ground, or just age, is a product that we have through the GoCommandoShow.com website. Is through doctors' recommended supplements, and these are a group of doctors that developed these supplements, and they also send it to third-party testing, so there's no fillers, nothing unnatural, and it's tested by a third party for the purity and quality. This two products I would like to talk to you about, and I recommend because I use them. The first being the Joint Health System, and that has the glucosamine, chondroitin, MSM, and it helps me every day because before I started taking it, getting out of bed very stiff and sore and achy. This just helps, promote, the joints. It's been proven to improve your cartilage. And then another product that I also use is also on the website. It's turmeric, which is a ground up leaf, and it works as an anti-inflammatory. So it's completely natural. It's very good, and you get it very low cost. You go to the GoCommandoShow.com website, order it there, and get it shipped to you directly from your house, and that's how you help the website. So we want to help you with knowledge and experience that different people have had, and we also want to help you with products that I use, other people also use, and it's able to help yourself. So, but I also now want to transition. So as Darren was having some of these injuries, he was looking at different opportunities in the civilian world, and he tried his hand, and he was successful in the civilian world, which a lot of people have hesitation. They're successful in the Marine Corps. Things are going very well. They like the location. He was in San Diego. His family, he grew up in Solana Beach and just north San Diego. Things were very good, but he still took the courage to make a leap leave the Marine Corps after he'd been promoted to major, and he's back in the aviation side. Then he decides, I want to continue to improve my professionalism. He goes to get his graduate degree, a Master's of Business Administration at University of Southern California. And some of these jobs prepared him very specifically, not just the Marine Corps, which we're going to talk about how all these jobs prepared him, his educational pursuits, as well as a few of these other civilian jobs that he had right after leaving the Marine Corps, prepared him for where he's at now, which I did want to talk to you about. So Darren currently is the Chief Financial Officer, where he's been for several years out in the Hawaiian Islands. And he not only flies helicopters, and that's what brought him here to Dallas, Texas, where he was in the simulator the last just over a week and a half. And he's going to go back to Hawaii and fly, and he can fly your family. But, you know, Marines of his caliber, you know, that especially serve and attack aircraft, you know, roles and serve with us on the ground in combat, they're always looking to do the next thing. And that's just what he did. Used his GI Bill, which I recommend any veteran to look into opportunities to expand your opportunities. He got his MBA, and that really helped him become the Chief Financial Officer, to be very business savvy, which they don't necessarily teach us in the Marine Corps. But he learned that up in Los Angeles through the University of Southern California's program. And can you tell us a little bit about your job and your role as Chief Financial Officer at Paradise Helicopters in Hawaii?
Sure. It's a dream job.
I bet.
It's a dream job. It's the job itself. It you know, there's really two sides to it. The flying piece is kind of my get out of the office reward, to just go see lava flowing into the ocean, go see 2,000 to 3,000 foot waterfalls.
And you're on the Big Island.
I'm on the Big Island. Yeah, our company headquarters is in Kailua, Kona, at the airport. But we do a doors off operation out of the Hilo airport, where we go primarily to the lava and back. But we also have two other bases, one at the old Naval Air Station Barbers Point, it's now called Kalaialoa. And then we have a heliport that we operate on the north shore of Oahu at the Turtle Bay Resort.
Wow.
So we have 12 aircraft now.
How's that been developed since you've been working with Paradise Helicopters?
I showed up with we had 6, and the 7th one was on order.
6 helicopters.
Yeah, we now have 12 helicopters, and kind of the reason I'm here was to learn a new aircraft, because we're trying to jump into the twin engine helicopter market. It's
right.
Been tried before and failed, but we're a risk taking group. Our ownership is a prior Marine pilot himself from the 80s. So
you think the twin engine helicopter brings additional safety?
Theoretically it does. It's mainly to do inter island flights.
Okay. So
we can fly people from islands. We can already do it now, but you have floats. But a twin engine helicopter can get you in between islands a little quicker, and yeah, theoretically more safer as well. But in any case, but there's the admin side of the job. There's the finance work, payroll, HR, dealing with a lot of the
expenses,
ad minutia,
forecasting, how to finance everything.
The bane of my existence is working capital. Yes, it's a challenge, but it's very similar to Force Recon. We've built up a nice group, a nice team, help each other when we're down. We're they're trying to prop everybody up, because it's a little different in the sense that if I don't go on a flight, there's not people dying. If the weather's bad or if the aircrafts have maintenance issues, hey, we cancel.
Right.
It's a very easy decision to make. So it's fairly low pressure, but yeah, we've built a stable. We're over 20 pilots now, and it's all mixed. It's about half prior military, half civilian, and it's a good balance. I think there's a tendency for people to think, oh, you want all military pilots, and I'll disagree with that entirely, because it's different perspectives and different skill sets that you can put together where the right people will complement each other. And and we've had some prior military that worked out great and some not so great, and same with the civilian trained pilots. But you also have to be very reflective at the leadership level of addressing their concerns. Some of them are valid, some are not. Pilots tend to be a little more what's the right word, little more like prima donnas, right? It takes an ego to want to do that job, but you got to be able, you got to be able to walk them back from time to time and kind of remind them what the greater good really is, and the right ones will understand it, and the wrong ones will go find somebody else to work for.
Right.
So,
now I do want to mention, when I retired from the Marine Corps, I retired out of the East Coast, and we had served on the West Coast, and Nuke, at that time when I was retired, was already working out in Hawaii. So very important thing is, I think when you transition, it's very important, for yourself to have some closure. And I didn't know if I'd ever go see Darren ever again, because I was going to do something different with school and either a job or start a business. But I took the time, even though it was just a day, and I want to use this to say Darren took me on a flight around the Big Island of Hawaii to see Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea and the waterfalls, and then we swung around the north side of the island. And I believe how he's describing it, it's for him, it's probably something fairly routine and that he does frequently. But for somebody like myself who's from the flat land of Kansas, or somebody here in Dallas, Texas, or Fort Worth, where we're at, is it's really amazing and remarkable to see the different types of environments. You see very lush green, you see some pastures, you see a volcano, and you see steep cliffs and waterfalls. So myself, really, really, really impressed in all the times we've been to Hawaii to train in the Marines and coming back and forth on ships. Like you said, there's they have Paradise Helicopters has stations, 2 of them on the Big Island of Hawaii and 2 over on Oahu. And what's your websites? How do they get to?
Oh, paradisecopters.com.
Paradisecopters.com.
Yeah, or just Google Paradise Helicopters. I think we're number 1.
Google Paradise Helicopters, and that's it's really amazing job you have. It's like a dream job, as you said, and it really is. To be able to live in Hawaii and be able to fly, people around. It was an incredible experience for me. It was great to see him, even though it was just that short period before I came back and started school. And it's great to see him now. So, but I really appreciate your time, Darren.
Brother, anytime.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.
To all my fellow grunts out there who in your youth felt it was your duty to protect us, I salute you. And thanks to the listeners of the Go Commando Show who labor on the farm, who are sweating on the construction site, putting forth your very best at the office. You are making a difference. Support the Go Commando Show in our pursuit of bringing you the highest quality professionals. Infiltrate the website at gocommandoshow.com, where you can view all of the podcasts and arm your team with incredible deals on health supplements, commando clothing, and equipment. Every time that you get a good deal, it supports the show. What deals? When you purchase anything from the website, Amazon, healthcare supplements, you're covering our 6. And to the ladies on the team, when you outfit yourself in the super sexy threads from Naked Zebra, and yes, I'm talking about in fuego, you are firing the sniper shot for our commandos. How else can you support? It's simple. You smash the follow and subscribe buttons on our social media. That is how you support us bringing great guests to talk about serious subjects, not the mainstream media's fake news. So thank you, and until our next show, stay in the attack and go Commando.